Hey BoLS fans, AdamHarry here with our continuing Retro Corner review of the Warhammer 40k Rogue Trader book. Last two reviews, the first one again just went over some of the basic rules of the game. The second one was more over some of the wacky equipment that you could find in Rogue Trader. In this edition of in this current review, what I want to go over today is basically start looking into some of the backstory, and we're going to start with the big boys on the block, which is the Imperium. So without further ado, let's jump in. This is where we left off last time with the start of the Age of Imperium, the third book, mini book here, as you can see, book 3. Again, do apologize for the condition of the book. It's getting up there in age. Some of the pages are literally falling out. The binding held up for a good 20 years, but it's getting closer to 30 and it's kind of falling apart at this point. Anyway, jumping right in. What we have here is just talks a little bit about the background. It talks about the galaxy, how space travel works with warp space. Talks about the warp storms and the different warp gates, warp drives, the warp, if you get what I'm talking about here. Also mentions the warp creatures and how to make your brain explode. One of the other things I wanted to mention about warp travel was the perceived time differences they talk about in a couple of different sections when I was reading this to kind of prep for this. They mention this, for instance, warp gates, slightly different warp time. Again, Rogue Trader was a GM based game, so you had two players that were playing and then also the GM, so it was more of an interactive story somewhat, so you could have more backstory, a lot more room for a little bit of creativeness as far as making your army or making your characters and stuff like that. So it was a bit of a role play experience. The perceived time dilation when traveling through the warp, it might feel like a day or two, but 6 months have gone by real time. So again, something to keep in mind. It's still in 40k, but you know, I know a lot of players don't really focus on some of the backstory and some of that stuff, but the perceived time dilation is a thing. In this section, it just goes over, again, warp storms, but it talks about the Imperium and how they travel through the warp using the human navigators. Some of the navigators look totally human, some of them look totally different, and you can just tell that boy ain't right. So, yeah, for me, I always picture the big warp navigator, the guild navigator from the movie Dune, the 80s version, not the recent one. Yeah, the big, nasty looking... Anyway, it does talk about the Astronomicon and how that's used to guide. Funny thing they talk about too is that the warp storm here talks about the warp storm activity can affect a total range of about 50,000 light years as the usual distance. The Astronomicon, the beacon, 50,000 light years usual distance. The Earth is about 30,000 light years from the center of the galaxy. So if you do the math, and the galaxy itself is about 85,000 light years distance across, according to them. So what that means is there's a chunk of the eastern fringe of the galaxy that doesn't have the warp beacon from the Astronomicon coverage. That's of course the eastern fringe, and that's also where the NIDs come from later on. So keep that in mind. So moving on. The Imperium, again, talks about the Imperial hierarchy. It mentions the Emperor. This quick section here goes through the different Imperial divisions, and I'll go into that more detail later on because each section gets a couple of pages explanation. But of course, you got the Emperor, Master of Mankind, all that fun stuff. The Adeptus Terra, the Adeptus Custodes, the Adeptus Mechanicus, the Adeptus Arbites, the Adeptus Astronomica, the Adeptus Astra Telepathica, the administration guys, the Inquisition, Planetary Administration, the Legions Astartes. Notice that it's not the Adeptus Astartes. They are the Legions Astartes. The Imperial Army, Imperial Navy, or the Fleet, Imperial Fleet, the Rogue Traders, which I thought this was cool. Again, organizational changes happen later, but early on, the Rogue Traders, their little thing here says they fill a vital role within the Imperium as freelance explorers, conquistadors, and merchants. A Rogue Trader is a trusted Imperial servant. He is given a ship, a crew, a contingent of Marines, and carte blanche to roam the worlds beyond the Imperium. So as you can see here, very different than it is today. The Rogue Traders had direct control of Marines because the Marines were, again, Legions Astartes, not the same. So The organization, slightly different. It does mention, though, again, the legions. There were 1,000 Marine legions, and each consisted of about 1,000 fighting men. So, slightly different. That's the same, but they don't go into any of the specifics about the heresy or anything like that. Matter of fact, when they're describing the Emperor, they don't really talk about how he got to the Golden Throne. They just say that he's really old and his body is shut down, and he's just a kind of a husk of a man, but he's still very strong-willed and psychically active and powerful. But yeah, I'm going to get into all of that later too. I do want to point out how the organizational chart looked. You had the Emperor up top, and the people that reported directly to him were the Adeptus Terra and the Inquisition. So those two people, those two functional houses there. Then you had the Custodes, who also reported directly to the Emperor, and then everybody else reported to Adeptus Terra. And the administration commanded the rogue traders, the legions, the planetary governors, the army, the fleet, and of course, the super fun assassins. So, yeah. One thing that was cool in this section as well is they go over the different types of worlds. If you're familiar at all with the background, you know, ag worlds were pretty common, death worlds are pretty common. You have hive worlds are also pretty common, industrial worlds. Two of the ones that kind of jump out at me as well were the feral planets and the medieval worlds. The feral planets, it actually talks about, this is kind of the planets itself were self-sustaining, but they also had kind of a primitive vibe to them, and that's where they recruited a lot of the Space Marine Legion guys. So a lot of the Adeptus Legionaries came from feral planets for some reason. So they just found that those guys, their nomadic way of life kind of fit with the Marine ideology. So, and in the medieval worlds, again, still kind of backwards, but they had a medieval level of technology. So the planetary governor would often be maybe stationed on a moon or something, and if there were psychers that were popping up, they would send in either assassins or somebody to kidnap them to take them out. But they left the majority of the population alone. They also had paradise planets and research stations, which those are exactly what they sound like. So moving on, we're looking again at the Emperor. It talks more about just who the Emperor was, how he's a super awesome psychic guy, and all that fun stuff. How he's a living carcass, but he's immobile. He built the Golden Throne a long time ago. They're not really sure. They don't go into a lot of detail about that. They do talk about these guys, which are the Adeptus Custodes, who kind of report to him, and yeah. But it paints a really grimdark picture, shockingly enough. The Emperor understands, sacrifices have to be made for the greater good of humanity to move on, and they paint his picture as like, yeah, just kind of like this, where he's like a terrible corpse, but I have to get the job done, and I'm the only one who's smart enough and old enough and strong-willed enough anyway, to make sure that humanity survives the coming terribleness in front of us. So, yeah. This section goes over more about the humans in general. Talks about basic human profiles here, standard stuff, movement, weapon skill, all that stuff. For, again, the role-playing game, those aspects, just if you wanted to generate a human character, those are your base stats. It talks about typical human stuff. So then it goes into more detail. You could pick, which, if you're playing the game, you could pick what your character was. So were you part of the Adeptus Custodes, which meant that you probably weren't leaving the Earth. You might leave the Emperor's side to go investigate stuff on Earth, but you're definitely not leaving Earth because your place was with the Emperor. You were super awesome, though. You had your really cool helmet and stuff. The Adeptus Mechanicus, which everybody loves those guys. Those are tech priests, all that fun stuff, building everything. The Adeptus Arbites, they refer to them a lot as judges, which you might know another guy named Dredd. That's kind of what these guys sound like. They go, but instead of going to giant hive blocks, they go to different cities. And there might be a couple of judges for a planet, and they were the judge, jury, executioner. Sounds very familiar to another series of judges. But yeah, that's the Adeptus Arbites. The Adeptus Astronomica, those are your psychers that teleport or help people guide themselves to the warp. all that fun stuff. Adeptus Astra Telepathica. Actually, these were the Psychers that were getting sacrificed mostly, and these are the astropaths that help to do communications and everything. Administratum, those are the guys that just got everything done. Other divisions and stuff like that. They talk about the, the different, the different stat lines for each one if you wanted to make one of those characters here. So, yeah. The toughest guys obviously were the Custodians. Those guys were weapon skill BS5, toughness and strength 4. The next toughest guys were the Arbites, who were 4s across the board except for a 3 toughness. So, and everybody else is just pretty much standard humans. So, yeah. They also talk about different equipment for each one, if you want to go into that. They also talk about the colors, which I thought was really interesting. So the colors for the Adeptus Custodes, if you look at them now, they're gold, and they're the guys with the cool halberd bolter things, and they're like pretty much awesome. But their original colors were black. Mechanicus was actually white. The Arbites also black. The Astronomicon guys were blue. Telepaths were green. The Administrator wore a combination of black, gray, and white, and the High Lords of Terra wore red. These are actually pictures of the different people here. You had a typical member of the Administratum here, and this was what a judge looked like. So, kind of funny, if you put a helmet right there, yeah, you know where I'm going with that. Again, random charts to roll gear, because you know how GW loves their charts. So all the way, just different types of weapons, las pistols up through hand flamers and stuff, bolt pistols, flamers. Those are really popular. Different close combat weapons as well. Moving on, the Inquisition. This was a fun section. This picture here, that is actually everybody's favorite. I don't know why they did it like this, but his description is actually on this page, and I might be causing somebody to have a heart attack here, but the page kind of fell out anyway. But this right here is the renowned Obi-Wan Sherlock Clouseau. Yes, I'm just going to read this section here. A tireless exposer of psychic misdeeds and genetic deviance, he wears a suit of skin-tight power armor under a long enveloping cloak. Like most Inquisitors, he disdains the open wearing of a helmet in favor of civilian headwear, hence the awesome hat there. Under his cloak, hidden various energy field devices, conversion field, stasis field, and a refractor field. Only one can be used at once, of course. His favorite weapon is a bull pistol, although he carries a power sword and 3 Jokero digital weapons, a hand flamer, las pistol, and needle pistol. He has several grenades secreted about his person, including 2 of each of blind, choke, haywire, and knockout, 1 of each of crack, plasma, strum, tanglefoot, and a vortex grenade. He also has a communicator, a bioscanner, blah blah blah, infrared contacts, pretty much everything that you could need. As can be seen, Obi-Wan Sherlock Clouseau is equipped for just about anything, but he has to be. He's an Inquisitor. So yes, that's everybody's favorite Inquisitor right there. There's the long cloak, there's the civilian headgear, there's the bull pistol, there's a random yin-yang symbol for awesome. So there you go. And his stats, of course, are very Inquisitor-like. Weapon skill BS 4, strength toughness 4, 5 for weapon skill BS, strength toughness 4, 2 wounds, 2 attacks. He's a boss. So moving on, this page again, I wanted to point out the Emperor. The organizational chart for the Inquisition is you had the Master of the Inquisition who reported directly to the Emperor, and of course the the Inquisition agents who report to the Master of the Inquisition. So fun times all around. More fun random charts to come up with weapons and all that good stuff for the Emperor, or for the Inquisitors of the Emperor. Some of the fun art here. I don't know what this guy is wearing. It's like a weird medieval kind of style, but maybe it's power armor as well. I don't know. Inquisitor is a weird man. So then it goes into more detail about Psychers and how those bad boys worked. Again, every single one of these sections has charts for rolling your weapons and other additional equipment, any kind of armored energy fields that the character might have. Again, role-playing game, so lots of detail, lots of fun stuff in there. Psychers had to be careful you know, manifesting psychic powers was not fun. It could backfire. So yeah, yeah. Adeptus Astra Telepathica, all those guys. If you want to be an astropath, there were rules for that, for playing that. Here's your stat line, special rules, different how you could get psychic powers or psychic attacks and stuff like that. Very important. You could also become a psychic beacon, which they said the radius on that was like 10 light years, I think. Yeah. The range of signal is 10 light years radius around the position of the astropath. So when you called for help, you know, any other psychers within 10 light years could pinpoint you. So kind of crazy, the range of the warp. This was the navigator guilds. So again, same kind of stuff. These are the guys that actually piloted the big ships. Again, physical appearance can vary greatly. So yeah, all the different weapons you could use. Pretty standard stuff too. Auto pistol, bullet pistol, hand flamer. We see this over and over and over. Armor is pretty much the same. Even all the way up to power armor. You roll on the percentile chance to get what type of armor. Close combat weapons, Jokero, digital weapons, flight packs, all this other stuff, all the random equipment. So yeah. And here's the big one, the Legion Astartes page. Again, goes over background of who these genetically engineered super awesome guys are, why they're important, how they're divided up. They're different from the regular army just because of the different organization stuff. So yes, and most importantly, and they shall know no fear. So in this section, even back in the day, you could tell that GW knew that this was probably going to be their bread and butter as far as selling minis. It talks about the organization of a Marine, where you had the Emperor, the chapter leader, Imperial commander, and then how those squads kind of reported up to who. So it's very different. 10 companies enlisted them out, and then 10 squads in each company, and then you had your astropath scribe and all that fun stuff too. Different stats. Do want to call one thing out for their characteristics. Most Marines had toughness 3, so that was the base profile. It could be altered if your guy went on to become more powerful, like a champion or a hero or something like that. But yeah, Marines were not 4s across the board; they were 3s across the board for the most. Or sorry, they were 4s up until toughness. So BS 4, weapon skill 4, strength 4, tough 3. So yeah, that's changed quite a bit. But it kind of feels like, reading through the older stuff, the Marines, while they were genetically engineered, they were kind of more like just dudes that were recruited to become Marines, kind of like an IG or a guardsman was recruited to become a guardsman. But they just had better equipment. They were more awesomer. It goes over the different squad loadouts and stuff like that. Again, a standard squad consisted of 10 Marines, 2 special weapons, and 1 sergeant. So 10 total guys. One of the fun things I wanted to point out was the standard equipment was a knife, a bolt pistol, and bolt gun. So if you apply that to Marines now, a typical Marine would have a close combat weapon, a bolt pistol, and a bolter, meaning he would get 2 base attack for a regular attack Marine. What I'm trying to say is, GW, give attack Marines the regular attacks. So yeah, moving on. They do talk about the different colors of the Marines. This is listed alphabetically, if you guys can make out. That says Blood Angels were first, Blood Drinkers, Crimson Fist, Dark Angels. Dark Angels, of course, were the first Legion, but yeah, their original Dark Angel color, by the way, was black, so not green. Matter of fact, there weren't really any green colors Marines. There was a gray was Space Wolf, obviously blue was Ultramarines, White Scars are still hanging out. Marine weapons, you could have access to a lot of random weapon stuff too. So grenades and all that fun stuff. They go a little bit over tactics of Marines and transport and rhinos and stuff like that. This will be fun. If you're a Space Wolf player, you will appreciate this page. The Fortress Monastery of the Space Wolves. It goes through what this looks like. So I'm just going to pause here for a second. I'm trying to line this up a little better. But that's what the Space Wolf Fortress Monastery look like. It doesn't really say where it's at. Of course, we all know it's Fenris, but There you go. So I'm not going to say that the Space Wolves were the poster boys for the Marines, but they did get referenced more than any other Marines, I think, in this book as far as who the Space Wolves were. And this goes into more detail about each section. You know, goes over the dungeons, the foundries, the shuttle silos, all that fun stuff. We kind of know what that stuff is. They did have a teleportatium or whatever, teleporter rooms for the Space Marines, or for the Space Wolves. So, yeah. And this guy looks like a G.I. Joe from the 70s. So, yeah. Moving on. It does go into now the warriors of the army. So this is your Astra Militarum or your IG guys. And again, these were just dudes in like flak armor with bolters or las guns or whatever they were packing. So they had a pretty straightforward stats as well. Typical profile were 3s across the board. Some champions had weapon skill BS4, so those are your veterans and stuff like that. So yeah, pretty standard stuff. More awesome artwork. Goes over the different uniforms, flak armor, standard armor. What else here? Weapons, autogun, bolt pistol, or bolt gun, las gun, all that fun stuff. Las guns being the most common of those, statistically anyway. Close combat weapons. These are some of the models. Man, like technology's changed quite a bit from what those Marine models look like and the IG guys back in the day to now. Changed quite a bit. This section goes over the rogue traders, which this was I don't know if he's a rogue trader or not, but he's a renegade that's being looked for by the Imperium. But yeah, it just talks about who these rogue traders were, what they did, their stat line. Again, these guys were actually tougher than regular Marines. Weapon skill ES 5, strength toughness 4. So yeah, they could definitely hang with the best of them. Rogue traders, again, they were the guys that had their own ships, that had their own crews, that had a contingent of Marines or, you know, a couple battalions of guys that would go explore and trade and make deals and conquer new worlds for the Imperium. So they played an important role. But they also had access to some pretty crazy stuff. These are the guys with the Needler, Neural Disruptor, Plasma Pistol, like the big guns. So they didn't all have them, but they did have access. This page, one of my personal favorites. These pages here falling apart, but these are the original chapter colors, the original 12 colors for the starting chapters. If you notice, we haven't talked about Chaos Marines at all. Those guys didn't actually show up until later. But you have, you know, Dark Angels here. That's the original black. Flesh Terrors. Flesh Terrors are here. Flesh Eaters are here. So they were now in the fluff. Of course, they're all divergent chapters from Blood Angels, who are here, and Blood Drinkers. But back in the day, they were kind of their own unique. They hadn't gone into all that stuff. You've got the Crimson Fists over here. And starting over down here, Space Wolves were that kind of gray, not really like they are now, where they got that blue color. It's definitely more of a gray color. Ultramarines, of course, rocking the blue. White Scars, Iron Hands, still black with the metal highlights there. Rainbow Warriors, what happened to these guys? They have the crazy helmets. They look like Ultramarines, but with like different colored beaky helms. And then, of course, the silver skulls here with some dude's head hanging off and like an orc head hanging off his shoulder pad. Those guys, pretty awesome and violent. And then last couple of guys, medic, field police, and a chaplain. Chaplain's in all black. So this review is already running longer than I would have liked. So I'm going to cut to the chase real fast. Again, assassin stuff, what they could pack, where they reported to as far as what weapons they had. All that fun stuff. Profile-wise, these guys were about as tough as a rogue trader. Weapon skill BS 5, strength toughness 4, so assassins were pretty awesome. More 80s awesome artwork on this page. I read these two captions and thought they were reversed. This caption reads, "A Space Marine stalks his prey." This one reads, "Marines are humanity's toughest warriors." Now, if you look at the actual pictures, though, this guy's definitely stalking something. And this guy looks like he just smoked that guy. So, I don't know. These are some human renegades. So, and I love his shoulder pad. It says the one big one. I don't know. And then he's got kill on his power fist because, yeah, it's very 80s. This is the Emperor's palace. As you can see here, he's a corpse with an IV bag still, and his bodyguard, the Adeptus Custodes, in the black, and guarding him. And they do. I forgot to mention earlier. They do talk about how the soul binding, the Psychers would die or go blind or be miserable, and yeah. So here's a diorama they made of Marines and a dreadnought smashing into some orcs, smashing face. Over here, this is what I wanted to end with. We talked about the Abhumans now. So we've got the Beastmen, who were part of the Imperium, Homo sapiens varietas. So Beastmen were actually in the Imperium. We've got Halflings, Homo sapiens minimus. We've got Ogrins, Homo sapiens gigantus. And Squats, Homo sapiens rotundus. So all of these Abhuman races were actually part of the Imperium. We know of at least 2 of these that were removed from the Imperial records, and one of them was completely removed, and every time you mention their name, you reset the clock, and they're not coming back. I'm sorry. They're just not coming back. But that's what I wanted to end with, our Space Dwarf buddies on this page. Next up, we'll be talking about the alien races, and that's the next review. But again, that's what I want to end with the Squats. I love them, but they just weren't cool enough, I guess. So, sorry guys. Anyway, this is AdamHarry with another Retro Corner review for BoLS. Hope you like what you're seeing. Come back next week for another one. Thanks again for watching.